The idea was to embarrass you. Pillory wasn't designed to hurt. Pillory was designed to be uncomfortable, and it was designed to simply embarrass you so that you wouldn't do whatever it was gotten you there in the first place. It was most common minor punishment. The pillory and the stocks were the most common punishment for minor offenses. Stocks are similar, except that you're sitting and you're just locked in by the ankles, as opposed to standing. Pillory was, as I said, it was designed for minor offenses, anything from not attending church, being a little too affectionate in public, whether it's with your boyfriend or girlfriend, husband or wife, could end you up in there. Things like cheating at cards, being drunk, disorderly, being caught with loaded dice, gossiping. It's pretty much an endless list. Not necessarily a violation of the actual law, but something that violated the community standards of the time could get you in there. And of course, people passing by, they get to see you and laugh at you. They were able to throw things at you. Weren't supposed to throw anything that would hurt. No sticks, no stones, pottery, anything like that. Nothing that would hurt. Rotten fruit, rotten vegetables, garbage. We've got a sheep over there. If you want to go over and pick up something that the sheep left, you want to put it in your hand, you can throw it at them. They were fair game for just about anything. Be in there for a few hours, maybe the entire day, until they decided to let you out.
You don't think a fella could get a Diet Coke in here, do you?
Not a chance. By the way, there's no bathroom breaks.
You guys, stay tuned.
I'm Carol Summers. We live in Manning, South Carolina on Lake Marion. And when we moved to South Carolina 30 years ago, we got interested in the history of the area. The swamp fox was under-recognized, we were afraid, and so we took it as a challenge to try to bring what Francis Marion had done between the Santee River and the Black River to a more public attention. And that's how the swamp fox murals came about, to put murals on outsides of buildings across Clarendon County to show what Francis Marion was doing in the battles in the American Revolution in this area. This event that spun out of the Mural Society is Francis Marion Living History Days or encampments for school children. And we have many reenactors come and show the skills, the survival skills that were necessary to over 230 years ago right through this area. So we want the children to appreciate what Francis Marion did here, as well as see how difficult it was to live and what kind of skills they had to learn. Everybody had a chore, and they had to raise the chickens and grow the corn and take care of the cow and learn how to use indigo dye and to sew and to weave. And we have a spinner here today. One of the other things that we do that we like to show the school children is to have them reenact Fort Watson. I would like for everybody that's hearing this to have visited Santee National Wildlife Refuge and the Indian Mound, because Fort Watson was built on top of the Indian Mound, and that's where Francis Marion and Light Horse Harry Lee and their men took the fort from the British. And this was the first fort to be taken from the British in South Carolina in 1781. So this was stopping the British from resupplying Camden right here in Clarendon County.
Well, welcome to Francis Marion Country. Today we're just an open event to show what the life of a militiaman would have been at this time. We have an outfit here we dress our school kids in to predict that there would be a militiaman at this time. They dress up, carry the clothes, I actually give them a weapon to tote, and they see what an event it would have been to serve as a militiaman. The militia was not paid, it was not fed, not clothed, not housed. If you were in the militia, everything was on your back when you reported to duty. Much like a modern National Guardsman is today versus he does get paid. Today we're reliving the life of Francis Marion. Our station here goes over how he got his actual nickname, the Swamp Fox. General Thomas Sumter was called the Gamecock. Francis Marion was called the Swamp Fox. We had a British cavalry officer in this area who was known as Bannister Taunton. He was called Bloody Taunton. So nicknames were a big, important part of history in this area. Bloody Taunton had descended upon the Francis Marion homelands, kind of invading it, looking for Marion, trying to capture him. Lord Cornwallis had told him, you need to capture Marion, get him out of our hair. Marion had a friend who lived near his name was Colonel Richardson. Colonel Richardson had been killed in battle. The homestead was close to Jack's Creek. The Richardson family lived there. Mrs. Richardson was there with her children. Colonel Taunton arrived with his troop of cavalry, threw Mrs. Richardson out of the homestead, occupied the home, and literally began eating her out of house and home, the horses grazing in the croplands. Marion found out about this and went to kind of run Taunton off. Well, an ensuing fight began. Marion did his casual act of always running like he did after initiating contact. They ran down a little place called Sammy Swamp, followed Sammy Swamp into Manning or Pocatello Swamp, whereupon they turned into Ox Swamp. Ox Swamp in November at this time was flooded, extremely cold. Marion's men plunged in, swam the swamp, no problem whatsoever. A while later, Taunton and his men, they rode up. He looked at the muddy tracks in the water. Taunton was said to have stood up in his stirrups and looked at his group with him and said, the very devil himself could not catch this wily old fox. And that's where the name Fox came from. We hung the moniker Swamp on him later. He was also called a Swamp Ghost. Francis Marion was involved in Clarendon County and Clarendon County history for his entire lifetime. He was actually buried originally in the lake, and his body was moved to where it's placed now in Berkeley County. If you would have walked up and met Francis Marion on the street, you would have thought he was just a casual citizen. He was a short man in stature. He walked with a limp due to jumping out of a building that somebody had hollered that the British were coming. He broke an ankle, and from there on he never really got over that. He was not a real fighter in a sense, but he's a leader, a tactician. When he retired, they wanted to have a ceremony for him, and they tried to draw his sword, and it was rusted into the scabbard. That shows you how much of an actual fighter he was. He was a leader. He did not do actual much fighting at all. He and Thomas Sumter were kind of casual contacts. Marion was in charge of this portion of state from about where the 95 bridge is toward Charleston. His mission was to harass the British soldiers coming out of Charleston, following the Santee corridor. Francis Marion covered everything from the Sumter district up through the Waxhaws into the Charlotte area.
Each one of these stations tells a story about the Revolution. And the one we tell is the best one for this area because it's the one that happened here. The Battle of Waibu Creek, which is right out there. The water you see out there is Waibu Creek since they filled it up with the lake. Before that was just a swamp. And there was a narrow causeway about as wide as half of this table. It went across the swamp there. And the first engagement of what came to be known as the Bridges Campaign was fought there. It's about a half mile down here. You could see it if you walked out to the beach where it happened. Francis Marion gave the British a lot of trouble by attacking the supply lines. So Major Watson, over there near Somerton, at the fort named for him, Fort Watson, was told to rid this area of Francis Marion. So he left there with about 450 troops. Marion didn't have but 50 or 60 at the time, and he had a basic principle. If you got more troops than I do, you're not going to see me. If I got more than you can't get away. And he followed that principle throughout the Revolution. When he came back here, he fell back down the river road. When he crossed Waboo Creek here, he looked at that causeway and realized out in the middle of that causeway, no matter how many troops anybody had, it was going to be 3 on 3. Wasn't wide enough for anything else. So he decided to give Watson a little trouble right here. And he did. When Watson arrived, he looked down, there was Francis Marion at the other end. He said, got infuriated and sent his cavalry to go get him. We're talking about a 2-horse charge now. Wasn't room for anything else. Marion said, I got more than 2 horses, so he sent his out there. Now, they fired at each other and then fell back. But Watson was not as dumb as some British officers are. He figured out right away that cavalry was not the way to go on this causeway out here. And he sent a group of people that Marion couldn't counter. He said it's heavy infantry. The ones who were armed with a musket with a long bayonet on the end of it. Well, not but about 4 or 5 of Marion's troops had a bayonet. So Marion told them to fall back. But he had a sergeant named Gavin James from the Williamsburg Jameses, not the ones over here at St. Mark's. And Gavin James had a bayonet on his musket. This is not the same kind, but it helps to illustrate a little bit. Once you fire this thing, you had a pretty good weapon to fight with, but if the guy that you're fighting had a bayonet on the end of his and you didn't, you were in trouble. So that's why they fell back. But Gavin James had one. And Gavin James was a big man. He wasn't used to dropping back from anybody. So he said, you guys go ahead and fall back, I'm gonna stay right here. He stood right in the middle of the causeway, 400 British troops coming after him, and said, come ahead. Well, of course, 401, they did come ahead. Gavin James blew one away, bam! Of course, that's all the shooting he got to do. Bayoneted one in the throat. And he bayoneted one in the chest. And my musket comes apart. But the one he bayoneted in the chest cheated. He was a dead man, but he wouldn't admit it. He grabbed the musket. So there's Gavin James by himself in the middle of that causeway with 400 British troops coming in. He got somebody stuck on the end of his musket and can't get him loose. So what he did, if he was a smart man, he'd have dropped that musket and run. And I'm not saying Gavin wasn't smart, but he was also stubborn, and it's hard to get a musket. So he dragged that British soldier 50 yards down that causeway. Now, that was pretty spectacular. And it was, people who were watching from the side thought it was spectacular. But also, something else happened that made it even more spectacular. Watson got tired of playing that silly game, so he wheeled his cannon up there. He's going to clear the causeway with grape shot. So he had to get his troops out of the way. So all those British soldiers fell back. Now to the people watching, it looked like the whole British army was running from Gavin James. And that's the way they told the story. And that story was told over and over again. Each time it was told, it got bigger. Until when I heard it as a little boy, And he's probably already heard this. Gavin James grabbed that British soldier by the foot, swung him around and around his head and cleared the whole causeway. And that's how folk tales get started.
This is the second year that the Manning DAR, the Elizabeth Peer Richardson Manning DAR, stationed right here in Manning, has had a memorial service to honor General Francis Marion as well as the Battle of Waibu Swamp. And we had other DARs and SARs in the area lay a wreath in this memorial ceremony.
I can imagine Watson coming out of Fort Watson as he starts his march with his flags flying and his drums beating and his fifes blaring, and all those men who were full of themselves and thinking they were the best military in the world coming down with all the confidence and arrogance that an army can muster, thinking they were going to chase Francis Marion to ground like a fox, that they were the hunters, he was the prey. And I can envision them reaching Waibu Swamp and looking across the causeway and seeing this Continental soldier's officer sitting on a horse patiently waiting for them on the other side. That's not how a prey is supposed to act. Marion showed no fear. I would have to assume if I were Watson, the hair would start to tingle on the back of my neck, looking at this man who's supposed to be running before us, who is patiently waiting for us to arrive. And because the causeway was narrow, when Watson sent his cavalry forward, Marion sent his cavalry forward, and there was a sharp battle, but neither side gained much advantage. When Watson brought up his artillery, Marion retreated, but he left behind more enemy dead soldiers than his own soldiers had received casualties. Watson claimed the victory because he held the field, and so the battle continued from one bridge to another, with Watson claiming victory at each bridge, but Marion inflicting heavy damages on the British, receiving very light casualties himself. At some point, the roles changed. Marion's riflemen, who can reach out at 300 yards and knock off a British soldier, were taking a terrible toll on the British Army, whose muskets were only good to about maybe 50 or 100 yards at most. It was only their artillery that was saving them. When Watson tried to sleep at night, Marion's snipers kept it up. And they kept it up to the point that, as I say, the roles changed. And Marion became the pursuer, and Watson became the pursued. And as the Battle of the Bridges, as it's called, ended, Watson was running just as fast as he could to get into Georgetown. His men were discarding their equipment by the roadside so they could move even faster. At the end of that campaign, Greene had returned from Virginia, had re-entered South Carolina, and Marion would take the offensive and never again truly be on the defensive as he had been earlier in the war. Without the actions of Marion and the brave men that served with him, South Carolina would probably still be under the control of the British. The remarkable thing about Marion, and everybody who knew him, anybody who wrote about him who knew the man, it was clear he was a remarkable man. People said nothing ill should ever be said of him. He loved his troops, he took care of his troops, and they loved him. He was the epitome of the citizen soldier. He fought for liberty. He didn't fight for money. Money didn't seem to bother him. He lost everything he had in the war. He fought for an ideal of the Declaration of Independence. And it's proper that we honor him today, and it's proper that we honor all those men who served with him, who gave up everything so we could have the liberty that we enjoy today. And it's also proper that in remembering those soldiers, we remember today's citizen soldiers, the folks that are serving in our National Guard and our reserves, men who follow in the footsteps of Francis Marion, who give up everything out of love of their community. And I want to thank you all for being here.
We've been doing this event here at Camp Bob Cooper. I think this is our 7th year, and it's grown, and we've learned more about what we could do and how to do it. We have school children come from 3rd grade and 6th grade from around Clarendon County. We also have had some children come in from Williamsburg County. They sign up ahead of time, and we make enough stations so that we try to keep the group small and have maybe 10 or 12 children at each station to learn one of these skills. They visit with the Hessian reenactors, who were the Germans. They visit with the Indigo Lady, the Colonial Games, how to prepare food 230 years ago, all of these skills. The success, we feel like, is exemplified in the teachers being more interested, and they give more excitement to the children about it, and therefore the children learn more about it. I think our highest compliment this morning was a lady brought her son back who was here 2 days ago because he wanted to come back today. And she said if he would give up Saturday morning cartoons for this, it must be really important. We would like to see it going because we feel it's really important. It's sort of taken over our lives, and but we would like someone else to feel this excitement about Frances Marion and passing it on to the young people. They need to contact George and Carol Summers. They can go to the ClarendonMurals.com website, and the reenactment, the living history encampment is right there, Frances Marion Days. They can call us, they can email us, we'd be glad to talk to them. They need to call us early so they can start getting their history clothes together.
Now you're going to be issued a musket.
All right, so this is the musket. This is, I don't know, guys.
And you're going to be a redcoat. You're
I'm
going to be
a
British.
redcoat?
Right.
This is
Yeah.
not good. Are you sure?
Well,
Yes.
I know you're going to lose, but that's okay.
Okay, I don't know about this, guys. I mean, seriously, I don't like to be on the losing side of things
But
here.
don't forget, at first you were winning.
How do you fire this thing, by the way?
And when you pull the trigger, the hammer ignites the powder and fires the musket ball.
Sounds awesome. I'm telling you what, guys, if I look this good, I'd hate to see what the competition looks like. Can I rewrite history? Do you think I have a chance of winning?
Well, by the way, I think it's time for you to wave
Wave
the
the
white
white flag.
You guys, keep watching.